Die Hard movies. I don't think so, but we'll go with that. Okay, Paul, you're next.
So I'm totally distracted by Sam's response. So I remember being at Christmas in LA once and looking up, and there was the Nakatomi Tower. I was like, oh my gosh, there it is. So I'm going to support Sam and say it is a holiday tradition to watch the Die Hard trilogy. There you go.
Is that better?
I think that's muting the owl.
Really? Okay. We don't want to mute the L. That's why it's red. Okay. Okay, Kevin, you're on.
Yeah, you bet, Kevin with SAR. My wife's family is Italian, so we have a tradition of making homemade raviolis for Christmas Eve. You got to do them a couple of days in advance and let them dry out and all of that, but it's a fun tradition. Kids have taken it on now on their own.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Cody Weaver.
Um, yeah, since Cody Weaver, Davis partnership, since I've been married, my wife's tradition has always been to make lefse. So now that's something that we do. Kids are getting into it. So lefse, not necessarily on Christmas, but leading up to Christmas is a big deal for us. So
Cool. Okay, thanks, Cody. Looks like we've got Patty Mason.
Good afternoon, Patty Mason, DLR Group. And I'll share a leading up to Christmas as well. Tradition for us is that we celebrate St. Nicholas Day. So that just happened on Saturday, December 6th. And we fill the stockings and read the story of St. Nicholas. And then on Christmas, we do not fill stockings. So like we kind of get that out of the way for St. Nicholas Day.
Cool. Thanks, Patty. Maria Sol.
Hi, everyone. Marisol Gallagher with Marisol Studios. You all are prompting even more traditions as you're going with food and everything. It sounds delicious. I think one of my favorites is we always try to be creative in how we write the tags on all of our presents. And so we all sit down and then we'll hand out presents together and read off all of the tags. And there are usually some creative ones in there that have to do with something that happened in the past. So that's always fun.
Oh, it didn't sound.
Yeah, I said it's because we have to log into this computer to connect to the owl. Yeah. This computer is on. VRS is on the meeting. Oh, it is? Yeah, we're right there. But whenever we turn on our sound.
Still working on sound here, guys. Sorry. So I kind of lost track. How about Robert?
Sorry, unmuting. Robert Peebles with SAR Architects. Mine is also going to be food related. We have my wife's family coming up from California, and they're a very Hispanic family, and I get the pleasure of cooking their grandmother's pozole and birria recipe, and it's going to be very intimidating, so I hope it goes well.
Robert, from someone who also took on that responsibility for our family, don't overdo it on the oregano.
Okay. William, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, you're up.
Okay. Hi everyone, William Callahan with CGF. One holiday tradition that's fairly new. We're in our third year now of doing this, but at where we live, there's a parkway just behind us, and the last 3 years I've been decorating this blue spruce tree that's kind of on the parkway. And I just like step it up each year. And so, yeah, it's been fun. My neighbors and just people that have walked by have like started commenting on, how they like it. And yeah, it feels nice. So,
Thanks, William. Bailey Beeger.
Thanks, Bob.
Bob. Hello, all. My name is Bailey Behill. I work for the state of Colorado, Office of the State Architect, and there are a number of pets in my family. So it seems like every year they all end up with some sort of gift, whether that's more treats, a new bandana, a new toy. So I think it's fun that we prioritize our animals, whether cats or dogs or whatever they may be, to make sure they feel the Christmas spirit.
Great, great. Thanks, Bailey. Laura?
Hi, Laura Perez, Perkins and Will. We have a circularity tradition in our family. We keep boxes, we don't throw them out. And we have a box from Limited 2, I think it was about 20 years ago. And it's whoever gets the Limited 2 box has to keep it, and the next year, wrap it and give it to someone else. So it's always fun to see those legacy boxes just kind of hold on and carry the story of past Christmases.
Okay, great. Thanks, Laura. How about Julia from BRS here in the room?
Hello, guys. So we have several traditions as well, but one of our favorites is getting all the cousins together and we make gingerbread houses. And this year we got a family email, not a family text, that announced in addition to gingerbread houses, we're having a rocket launching competition is being added to the Christmas tradition. So that'll be pretty entertaining.
Okay. How about you, Amanda? Carmen, go ahead.
I mean, just decorating the tree, I guess, every year. It's fun, like just unwrapping the different ornaments, and my husband's family, everyone gets an ornament that is related to their year. So like, if you're passing your Aries, you get an ornament, or you're, having a baby, you get an ornament. So that's kind of fun.
I'm Patience from BRS. There's so many of us. My tradition is I like to take my kids and my husband and all of us go to the zoo lights at the Denver Zoo, and we like to go see the beautiful lights and have hot cocoa and just a night out as a family.
Thank you, Patience. So as a granddad, I have slightly different traditions than you guys. But one of them is we have these little knitted triangular sort of ornaments that you squeeze and it opens its mouth. And so we've always put Hershey Kisses in there. And so the two granddaughters, when they show up, that's the first thing they look for on the tree and try to squeeze it and see what's in there. I don't know if we have Hershey Kisses anymore, so it could just be money, which they probably would like a lot. So that's one for me. Okay, let's move ahead here. We're going to talk about 2025 actions, what we did in 2025. And as I go through these, I would love any comments or ideas or follow-ups that we might pursue. Early in the year, we had a mass timber presentation by KONA in Swinnerton. And then we had a good presentation by Turner Construction on A5 emissions. I don't think anybody from Turner is on today. We did issue also some baselines and benchmarks, very consistent with CLF and also studies done by Perkins and Will. Brianne from Airbnb helped us with a spec questionnaire and follow-up discussions. And then I think it was in June that we had a US GBC panel with Paul Hutton, Laura Perez, Amanda Spice, and Annie Kell, who used to be a member of CECC. Actually, I have kind of an interesting I can find it. Oh, never mind. Then we had a surprise visit by Dirk Hessner, one of the sort of original sustainability guys on the structural side. He works at Walter P. Moore, Houston office. He was in town. I believe the meeting was at Fort Copeland Mine. And he dropped in and shared his knowledge about concrete and upcoming concrete innovations. It's interesting. Also, probably about the same time frame, William Callahan led a effort for a submittal. We had a good submittal for an R&D award. Didn't get that, but got some good ideas for next year. And then Amanda did a hurry up submittal for AI Fall Conference. I think she did it in 30 minutes. And maybe 30 minutes is not quite enough time because we didn't get that one either. And we had a really good circularity presentation by Alexis Vitale, KLNA, and Emily Freeman, City of Boulder. And Alexis has since moved to a company called Cambia. Not sure how many people know about that company. It's a company that focuses on timber and mass timber and all things related. And hopefully we'll get Alexis to do a presentation sometime later in 2026. Any comments or thoughts? You guys
feels like it's been a productive year, Bob.
Well, it seems like it, and I could have added more to the list, but this kind of falls in line with a board meeting that we had in November, Katie, Paul, and Kevin, where we talked about next year a little bit, and what we decided to do is to have a joint board meeting and steering committee member meeting plus a few others in January to try to decide where to go from here. We're at so it's that meeting on the 15th. We have a planning meeting with the board plus steering committee plus a few others. And we're just going to talk about sort of where we've been, where we're going, what we should focus on next year and going forward. We're at the end of year 5. So it's kind of a turning point, maybe. We would like to get more involvement from the champions, like the people on the steering committee and the others that are attending that meeting, and we'll let you know what we come up with on that February 10th large group meeting. So because that's a fairly busy agenda item there, we're going to go ahead and cancel the January 13th working session, which is typically, kind of working towards the next meeting. And also the steering committee meeting that meets that same day. So those will be canceled. And we'll just get back together on February 10th and talk about our plans going forward. So Sam and Paul have worked on this a little bit more. We had a working session back in May and had a few people attend. So there'll be some repeat information here, but mostly we'd like to turn this into an open conversation about experiences that other people other members, other people have had. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sam and Paul. I think that's a rock group from the 60s.
Yeah, sounds good. This presentation has morphed a little bit more into a discussion format, and I think that may resonate in the fact of the timeline that we started this presentation. It was a little bit more guided even internally in our firm. And over, we started developing this like, I don't know, before May, April, anyways. Since that, it has evolved internally, and I'm kind of reflecting that to this presentation. We'll kind of go into the weeds of it a little bit more, but the short synopsis is that we don't talk about it a lot. We never really did, and it's really hard to push into the client's realm. And so we're just trying to figure out how to introduce it and what we want to introduce more. So we'll dive into it a little bit more, but again, very open-ended. Let me share my screen here. Bob, I might ask to, maybe that's just sharing right now. Everyone seeing my screen here?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, what is the presentation shortcut? Anyone know for Google Slides? There we go. Okay. So with that said, we'll kind of dive into this. I think, I'll flash through a few of these slides. We've probably seen most of these graphics before in some format or another, but the general idea here in presenting to the clients and starting a discussion is just education. Laying the foundation clearly, as it says. So understanding where the client is. Some clients are familiar, some clients are not. Some clients are receptive, some are not. And so there's a lot of judgment used in who and where and when and how deep to dive into each of these subjects. So, if the client is has standards that we're trying to meet, sure, we'll go for it. But if there's a lot of pushback or clearly they're not receptive to it, we might not even talk about this, very frankly. So I know that this group is clearly interested in reducing embodied carbon in the world. So it's like not having talked about it at all. It's like, well, shucks, what do we do? So we talk a lot about operational energy with clients, kind of utility costs, ongoing costs, maintenance costs, as well as first costs. So I think kind of an understanding of where this all lives, both in like utility cost realm, that's kind of like segment A, and I'm not saying that embodied carbon is, but that's usually what clients are very interested in. So how do we equivocate it, or try to make sure the client understands in an analogous way? And typically that's how it is. Most often our clients are unaware and very uneducated about this. So if a client is interested and savvy a little bit, we kind of start talking about the different stages of embodied carbon. So where we're, as far as operational versus embodied carbon, like how we can segment these. Again, we really don't go into the weeds of this with clients, to be honest. This is a little bit more of an internal note, product sourcing, things like that. So I think the first and foremost, what we've done internally is, first off, realizing that the architecture team, frankly, doesn't know a lot. There's a segment of our internal team here, and HCM has grown. I'm with Fort Copeland Mock. HCM, we've grown like an enormous amount in the last couple of years, and I'm aware every day of people that have not really discussed sustainability things, and not that they're uninterested, just that they're exposed to other things in the project development cycle. So the first and foremost is just making sure our architecture team is aware of what embodied carbon is. Usually we have to kind of do just a primer for our team. We have internal team credits that we sometimes get. Someone presents from the team as an expert. So we try to educate our team both as like a broad team, as well as a project specific team. And again, we have different market sectors. I'm sure everyone else in this group also does. So for example, our market rate housing, we don't really do a lot of focus on this, but on the educational side, PK-12, higher education, we do focus a lot more. So as far as internal team development, we try to focus more on that. So beyond the architecture team, the design consultant team, we're often made aware that a lot of our consultants don't really focus on sustainability, and again, for good reason. There are a lot of other priorities, and I don't mean to dismiss embodied carbon, but it's a lot of competing demands for time and energy. So I think this group probably knows it, but typically structure is one of the higher elements where there's an ability to reduce embodied carbon, as well as some site infrastructure and civil, hardscapes, things like that. But from an MEP realm, and this is something that I am not an expert in, and Bob and anyone else can jump in here, but the amount of reduction that we can do from a specification, from a sizing reduction, from a material difference, it's a lot more manipulatable from structure and civil disciplines rather than MEP, for example. You're a lot more focused on energy costs and efficiencies of systems, that sort of thing in MEP. So while we want to talk about it with all our consultants, we don't really talk with our MEP consultants today. But Bob did make me aware that there's an MEP, you probably say the name of it again, is the 2040 commitment, reducing embodied carbon in MEP systems.
Hey, Sam, something interesting that came up in our conversation preparing for this last week was how when we look back at the last 20 years of focus on operational energy and then operational carbon, so much of the conversation was the design team plus MEP. Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting that now as we move into embodied carbon, that dynamic is very much switching to the point where we've been leaving out MEP on these embodied carbon conversations. And the entity that used to hardly be involved, structure and a little bit civil, are now coming front and center in these new conversations. So it's just an interesting switch in the dynamic of how design teams are starting to deal with sustainability at larger scale. And curious if other individuals here or firms are seeing that same kind of shift.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that, Paul. And this is like try not to project, but this is my experience. I would love to hear other people's experiences with this. Our internal team at HCM, we have a landscape architecture team, has explored various softwares to calculate embodied carbon, Pathfinder being one of them. I'm not familiar with it, but I know it exists. From a software and implementation standpoint, they have all said it's very difficult to use, or it's not, it doesn't jive with AutoCAD software. So, again, for various reasons, and I don't know if these are excuses or challenges to overcome euphemistically. Our landscape team has been interested in how they can improve things, but it's also not necessarily the discipline that can affect the most change, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting, Sam. We've also asked our landscape teams to not only look at the embodied carbon of the hardscapes they're designing, but how does that compare then to the sequestration of carbon that are due to the plant materials they're specifying over the first 10, 15, 20 years. So it's really an interesting conversation starting to involve the landscape teams too, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like one of the few opportunities to actually sequester carbon apart from like mass timber or other wood materials, which is not, yes, you can talk about that, but it's like, it's not within our realm to sequester carbon necessarily, unless it's an innovative material typically, or mass timber. So it's a cool conversation to be had from a landscape point of view.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I wanted to introduce, Sam, was the issue, and you raised this last week, the degree to which the conversations are different now than they were even a year ago. Mm-hmm. And for example, you mentioned that your team doesn't use the word sustainability anymore, and I don't think that's unusual at all. So I'm curious if anybody on the call today has experiences with how you've changed the way you're talking to clients or team members as a result of all the other larger changes around us in the last 12 months.
Yeah, we've been trying to work on what that verbiage is. I'm curious if you kind of have come up with some of those terms, like efficiency, or it's regionally makes sense for some reason. But yeah, it seems like it's easier to sell those right now than it is to sell sustainability for sustainability's sake. But
Yeah.
you know, as we know, there's a lot of benefits to sustainability outside of the fact that it's, you know, the right thing for our planet and future.
Yeah, Carmen, I think that was you that said that, and I'll chime in, but everyone else, please join in the conversation here too. So one, I mean, this is not meant to be a political conversation, but in the last 12 months, this is how the conversation has evolved on our internal team, and basically we've scrubbed the word sustainability from everything we do. Like a website, proposals, contract language. We've turned it into building performance. And it's not only indicative of like the sustainability factor, so like, you know, do good for the world, but it's like tied into human performance, energy performance, you know, reductions in cost, things like that. So it is euphemistic for sure. And unfortunately, it's something that we've had to do, but it has been, you know, again, since the evolution of starting this presentation till now, it's like almost completely different in our firm. Just how we talk about it. The substance is relatively the same though. So
Do you feel like you've gotten more headway with using terms outside of sustainability?
I wouldn't necessarily. So a lot of clients like kind of their eyes glaze over, roll back in their head when you say sustainability, and again, not everyone. But when you put it in a performance factor, everyone wants a performance car. Everyone wants a performing building. And how do you sell that better than sustainability, which is, again, you could probably talk ad nauseum just about like the verbiage. But when it comes to the like measurable outcomes that are also adjacent to sustainability, so like wellness factors, productivity, you know, again, healthcare outcomes, those sorts of things. So like the social cost of not carbon, but the social cost of all the other measures that we're implementing. That's typically what the building performance talks about, and we've tried to sell that a little bit more. So, you know, for very specific examples, we're talking about, you know, test grade improvement or test score improvement at schools. It's like one of our performance factors, and you might not talk about that in sustainability realms, but so it's a long kind of roundabout conversation of being able to implement any discussion topic under the umbrella of building performance, as well as getting rid of like literally the keyword search on a website if we're like grant funded or something like that, where there are federal dollars that are now going away if you use bad words, things like that. So I hate to, sorry, I'm getting riled, but
I'll share a word. So we have an engagement workshop that where the S in the acronym stands for historically sustainability. And I had a client in the Southeast that said, you know, sorry, can't do that workshop. You know, we'd love to do it, but we don't use the S word with this client. And I said, well, let's just swap out the S for stewardship and see if that floats with the conservative client in kind of a conservative sector and all the things. And they were like, yes, like, let's go. They were super into the stewardship. The client was the owner, as like, you know, this is one of those. I mean, we didn't pray before the start of the meeting, but it was it was close. It was close, you know, it was like Pledge of Allegiance before kind of thing, you know. And so stewardship worked. And it did take a little bit of work on our end to like scrub out the S for we didn't remove it 100% on everything, but we were able to switch it out pretty easily on some of the slide decks, you know, the electronics. But we have not removed it from our website or proposal language or anything like that. We have made some moves to push our performance analysts into the disciplines, not let them live in like a separate team. Like historically, they've been like on the high performance design team, and then a project can or cannot choose to engage with them on a. So that's something that's been evolving at DLR Group. Is like, no, they're just experts like anyone else with an additional set of expertise related to the performance analytics tools that they use. So in structure, that could be Tally for embodied carbon analysis, and so on. So it's helped get them into projects, you know, put onto projects. Yeah.
Thanks, Patty. I think what this shows is more so than ever before, the language changes depending on the client and even the location. So we have to be more flexible, more willing to make those adaptations.
Yeah. And I think the overarching thing of this is that it's not meant to be judgmental, and it may come across as that frequently. And I don't think we are aware, as I'm speaking for myself or like a few of my colleagues, it feels kind of judgmental or shameful to not be aware and or ignorant of it. So how do you meet clients where they are? How do you improve upon where they're at without necessarily having some like threshold minimums or something like that? So we always try to improve and invite people along. And again, educate, don't, it's educate, don't shame, essentially. And I'm going to go to the next slide, kind of as well as the contractors. We have our internal team, we have our design consultant internal team, we have our client clearly, and then typically we have a contractor somewhere in the process. I've been a fortunate part of multiple teams in the last couple of years that have all been design build teams. So we've been very close with our contractors through kind of early stage design and procurement and even subcontractor engagement early on in projects. So, I used to work a lot of design bid build projects, and you don't really have a lot of early education. You kind of have after the project is out and the bid is there and won. You might be able to talk to the contracting team about that. But there's not any sort of like requirements necessarily. We talked just in the kind of pre-meeting of this, if there's any sort of possibility for the client to include a rubric of some kind about familiarity for GCs with embodied carbon, similar to like familiarity with LEED or other sustainability portions or metrics. And I also say that as in, sorry, this is kind of in the weeds and we can kind of make it a little bit more of a discussion in that a lot of times this is based on the subcontractor and the materials or supplier procurement. So while we do specify certain things, are the subcontractors familiar with this as well? Is whoever they're buying it from, are they well documented? Do they have multiple sources? For a lot of state projects, you have to have multiple sources that are also well documented. So it kind of becomes a little bit difficult at the forefront. So anyways, we always like to have a partner, design build partner early on that can help steer us in the right direction with the right subcontractor. And I'd be curious to see or hear if anyone else has different experiences with talking to the contractor. Again, probably a lack of familiarity. It's just like a new subject knowledge compared to even, LEED. A lot of contractors were unaware and not super educated on that. But after a couple of years, people are getting pretty savvy. So
I think those last couple of bullets are really important, Sam. And what we're trying to get at was to the extent that you as a designer are involved in, say, pre-qualification or selection, even if it is design bid build, can you try to include some criteria in that pre-qualification material or interviews about embodied carbon? So there is an opportunity there. I don't think just because it's design bid build, we shouldn't assume that there aren't opportunities for us to carry this issue forward.
And wouldn't the specifications be kind of a starting point for that conversation? I mean, they're going to come in and see these specifications before they bid. They're going to have a bunch of questions, and then that's the sort of moment of truth where you can start bringing it up and why they're there and how you achieve these requirements. I mean, that seems to be kind of the pry bar for design bid build.
Yeah, absolutely, Bob. And also, if you have a pre-bid meeting with contractors, another chance to raise the issue and invite questions.
Yeah. So I'll also say sometimes we may have different subcontractors that have different information than us or have the latest documentation or sourcing that we might not be aware of. So either A, they might be able to procure a material that we didn't know about more easily, or just like LEED products, you had something used a couple of years ago that's no longer qualifiable or doesn't have the same requirements. So that's something that just knowing the current market conditions and how things stand, it's helpful to have that bridge or that communication link as much as possible. I don't think it's drives a project necessarily, but if it is, say, a big steel project, sure, you'd kind of like to know how to procure those materials differently.
I think also the specifications turn more and more towards performance specs that it kind of puts the onus on all the way down to the subcontractor level and say, here's what we're trying to achieve. Help us achieve that. What are your ideas? What are the suppliers that can help in it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge, Bob. And early in design, clearly it's changeable, modifiable versus after it's out in the market. It's, what can you do? There's not a lot, at least without revisions. We were kind of hoping Turner was going to be here today just to hear about their experience with it. Anyone? I don't see anyone Turner on, but I would be curious just to hear from a contractor standpoint, what they hear from architects. Do they get pushed in ways? Do they get, pushed back from their subcontractors? Again, I'm not quite sure.
Sam, I was just thinking, it used to be that anytime you included sustainability requirements in specs or, some other form of documentation, a lot of times it would be interpreted as additional cost from contractors, and that would be the whole song and dance. The owner would come back and say, why are things higher than expected or something like that? Or what I'm hearing is that because we included, X requirement that the contractor's saying that's adding, a few percentage points to the cost, and then the owner would, want to remove something. But I think what we're seeing now, and especially with contractors like Turner, is that, they look at their knowledge and expertise in sustainability and delivering lower carbon projects as now a competitive advantage. If they're able to deliver on sustainability performance, at no additional cost or at, some additional cost that's more competitive in the market, that it's helping them win more jobs. And I think it really strengthens their brand and their relationship with designers, architects that are and have, been wanting to specify more sustainable projects. So, I think like a contractor like Turner is one that, we're like more than happy to recommend, to an owner and want to pull them in, when available.
How do we get that message out to other contractors specifically?
Yeah, I think definitely, at least in the kind of lead or kind of wellness or sustainability, previously it was a competitive advantage for sure. And it now became, at least those metrics became a base requirement for frequently. And I'm wondering, I'd be curious if embodied carbon is going to be a threshold that people will have to kind of respond to, or contractors will have to respond to. And maybe they will, as long as it's brought up in the pre-qualification or some sort of somewhere, not just the specifications necessarily. So we had, we talked about the client. So our design team, contractor, and then client. And this is really about the client and kind of how you get there. Again, very dependent on the client and how interested or savvy they are. How much we include in our standard proposal language, again, varies for clients, varies regionally. We usually have a standard, as you say, a standard blurb on embodied carbon ready to go. If we can make an elevator pitch, we can, or we will. Usually if the project is large enough, we do have a sustainability shred. We have, I don't know our exact number of size of project, but we typically have a sustainability shred, as I'm sure most people do here. Kind of what achievements we're looking to get, what are our requirements for the project and all that sort of stuff. And then we also do have kind of a scope of services description. So this is something that is in our contract. If if we calculate it, if we are looking at reductions, things like that. So we want to make sure there's a fee for it. This is where, again, in the last kind of year, we might drop the line item, but we might have the fee for it baked into our architectural services. So we do account for it internally. I think one of these later slides, it's like, how much can we do without talking to the clients? It sounds bad saying it surreptitiously. However, how much can we do without adding cost? How much can we do without bringing it up as a big conversation topic, but knowing we are reducing carbon in general for the project? And again, ethically, we want to make sure we're on the right side of that, so we're not duping anyone. But we want to do as best as we can for the world. So again, for our basic sustainability threats, we do typically talk about it. We might not have like measurable achievements or reductions for a lot of projects, but we do bring it up in case the client is focused on that. And then internally at HCM, this is again evolved from a year ago. I was supposed to get the number, I didn't, but we have something around 100 plus projects per year, and we have tracked about 90% of them as far as measured our embodied carbon quantity per square foot. So we have our own internal baseline. Bob, I will get that to you. Our sustainability kind of manager is actually in Denver today. So yeah, long story short, we used to only have a couple complete measurements for projects 2 years ago, and now we're up to 90% of our projects. So pretty awesome increase as far as a measurable baseline.
Are you doing that just internally, or do you have a dedicated person that's their job, or?
Yeah, we have a dedicated not the manager, but a sustainability design, not sure exactly their title, kind of like a junior designer that does that. Or we've started to educate our younger designers to calculate that for their projects. So you have someone that's relatively an expert in the specific project that can help push or pull and knows how to manipulate it within a project. And that's something that we've just had to train in, as well as make a concerted effort to make it easy and efficient for that number to be obtained. So Tally, we used to use Code Tool like 6 months ago until they morphed into like an AI firm. And then now we're using, what's the name of it? Studio. I should know of it. We just started to change it. Blanking on the name right now. I'm sure some of you know this. Climate Studio, that's what it is. So yeah, we've got kind of different tools and different softwares, and I think internally our biggest hang up earlier was just kind of the time taken, and now that we've become efficient with it, it's relatively easy to do. So I'd be curious just to hear other folks, and again, this is like a conversation that's completely evolved in almost 12 months here. So what we wrote here, this slide was like, yeah, it was a lot of ambition, and I think the ambition has kind of gone away a little bit in terms of just kind of managing where we're at right now. So curious to hear anyone else's anecdotal experiences, if things have changed, if things are the same, if you're still pushing your clients on this or focusing on other metrics. I don't know.
I agree with a lot of what you've shared. I would just add that, I think sometimes it comes down to, or one of the ways that we can provide value, for clients is helping them better understand their situation. And, in order to do that, we need to really understand where their value comes from and their business models. But, if it's like entitlement related, sometimes sustainability, if the client isn't necessarily like, if they don't have their own sustainability goals, sometimes we can help illustrate, like the Denver market, and how Denver, views, the city of Denver views sustainability, and, what aspects of the entitlement process, will require the client to, to address sustainability. So sometimes there's opportunities, I guess, just beyond, maybe what the client, is saying about themselves or what they've publicly stated on their website.
yeah, one of the things that we've done, and this is kind of a function of working in different geographies and different kind of market sectors, is that we have we have stringent requirements in different jurisdictions. So like City of Denver, we work in Washington, D.C., and those are again, most people probably do this, but those are the ones that kind of are the guinea pigs, and they kind of push the other projects. So we learn how to push and pull different variables and what's the most effective for the least cost, essentially. And we'll try to implement or try to at least start with those conversations for other projects. Again, if the jurisdiction doesn't require it, usually we get some pushback, but at least we know the tools that are manipulatable and we've done it before. So in time, in 5-10 years, who knows when different jurisdictions will adopt other. And typically, there's your code mandated or code requirements, not just kind of like a feel good requirement. Those leaders will kind of trickle down to the other projects that we're working on, and our engineers will also use those same changes. So.
Hey, Sam, I'd like to ask our group today, maybe to stimulate a little more conversation, where have you had some successes in the last 12 months in terms of systems or materials? And I know we've all been pushing CLT and looking at CLT projects, and that's great. What else are people looking at? Is it concrete, masonry, insulation? What other materials or systems are people feeling like there is interest in or possibilities for success? Anybody can share anything on that?
I don't think we've really run it to ground yet, but in prefabrication, either in volumetric modular or panelized skin systems, that's starting to enter the conversation more. It was always a cost and time factor before, but we do actually have a client that is wanting us to evaluate flat pack modular versus volumetric modular for a mountain environment. And Robert can speak to more to this. It's actually his project. But I think that's that's something new to us. And then on one of the mass timber towers we're doing right now, the panelization discussion has been pretty interesting in terms of factory built versus site built, gaining some efficiencies, certainly more efficient at waste, better quality, a little tighter. And so we're seeing some opportunities there. It's, fundamentally, if it's a wall to wall to wall kind of a thing. But having clients that actually are curious about that or interested in that gives us the opportunity to say, like, yeah, but these few small tweaks within that wall could really make a difference. That's encouraging.
That's really interesting, Kevin, the modular issue. A couple of years ago at Cunningham, we did an analysis of that, and there were a lot of interesting savings at the plant in terms of material efficiency, but there's some material inefficiency when you join those things in material in terms of the doubling or stacking of the common elements. So
exactly,
really, it gets to be a really complex analysis to figure out where the benefits are in modular construction.
I'd be curious if Paul or Kevin or anyone has seen, so less from a material standpoint, more from like a waste and efficiency of lack of waste. That has to be a quantifiable number that would reduce embodied carbon, just reduced waste, reduced materials overall. Was there, without any changing of material types, do you know if there was like an actual quantifiable reduction in embodied carbon just due to lack of waste or reduced waste by X%?
I'd have to go back and look at the study we did, see if I can find the information on that, Sam, but it'd be worth looking for.
No. We're doing a lot of work on the Virgin Islands right now, and they have like a moratorium on waste in the landfill. It's incredible. Issues related to waste management. And so the design team is using some strategies, and I could get more information from them about how they're trying to consider just making sure they order the right amount of material, like being really, really mindful of the ordering and this kind of even the shapes and the lengths and just like everything, so that they don't inadvertently generate more waste. and like working closely with the contractor and the subcontractors on this goal of significantly limiting or minimizing how much extra material is even brought onto the site. So that one kind of is driven by the lack of infrastructure where the school's going. But I'm sure that, like was mentioned before, this will probably be an opportunity for a lot of learning and applied to other projects where we're trying to, track or a client that perhaps has a goal around increased diversion. We just did our first, we do like little internal embodied carbon workshops or charrettes, and we realized that our structural team had been doing them, but without architecture. So we just did our first one where we put the teams together and talked about embodied carbon as from both the structure in our build partner. GC was there. It's a design build project. It's following the Buy Clean Colorado Act. It's getting LEED certified, so it has some of those drivers already. But it was interesting just to observe that the stacking of strategies, kind of starting from the ground up and like listening to how they're each going to contribute some additional research into what's possible, even down to I was looking at their notes. Following up with the spec writer to specify metal studs with higher recycled content, like down to that like stud. But other things around like modifying the roof assembly, reducing the slab thickness. So just trying to kind of be a little bit more intentional as it relates to where each of their disciplines can contribute to this.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's also up to structure to specify quite a few different materials or properties of materials, and something that, yeah, we have the basic shape correct, but if you can modify those specifications, that's pretty big. I like it.
The only other maybe potentially interesting thing to add on to the conversation of modular waste is we ran into some NREL researchers who put together a really comprehensive document on energy efficiency in modular construction, and they ran into some funding issues this year. But because they're modular factories and technically come under the conversation of industrial and factory-based research, they've been trying to kind of push their funding agenda this year, and who knows, maybe that's successful. But there is a pretty good tie between NREL and like local Colorado modular manufacturers.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It feels almost so basic to talk about like just the waste factor of a project contributing to a significant amount of embodied carbon versus a single material itself. And I don't want to belabor it, but it's something that I don't think we talk about much. So like how does that waste factor get reduced? In the same vein, and I don't know if I have a slide on this, but we brought it up. We kind of brought it up the other day, was just in the initial programming, making a program. Are there ways to reduce the program size? Just it's the same as, can you use a building over again, or adapt it versus build new? So can you reduce the program by a classroom? I think one of the biggest struggles that I've been pushing against in terms of a specific project that's been my life for the last 5 years, but classroom schedules at universities are typically like 11 to 3, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we get a lot of pushback for even suggesting that there's Monday or Friday classes, let alone 8 a.m. or 7 p.m. classes. And again, there's a lot of reasons not to do it, and I hear it. But if you were to do that, we would have been able to reduce the total number of classrooms by a lot. And so, this is the first step, even in the programming world, to reduce the building size, make it more efficient programmatically, versus all these kind of, like, I would say, secondary or tertiary elements, which do a lot, but reduce, reuse, recycle first, and then kind of get in the weeds of everything else. So brought it up, just curious if anyone's had any traction or any conversations with that. I don't know if you push your every client to reduce the size of their building. Usually it comes to you pretty well stacked, but
hey, Sam, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, thanks, Sam. That reminds me of a really important new topic, which is the conversion of office buildings to housing. In fact, I was in a conversation with Department of Energy this morning about that. They're starting to look into it and asked me to find some good examples. So if anybody in the call is involved in a conversion of office to housing, let me know. We'll bring some resources to do some analysis and maybe get that published. So I'm actively looking for those right now.
I got one for you, Paul.
Okay, just
Yes,
send me,
I'll
get
drop
in
you a line.
touch and we'll do some
Yeah.
work on it.
I think we struggle with that about, if you show them that, like, some efficiency measures cost more, but there's benefits, but they might lose program. It's really hard to convince the client to not always pick program. And so we're currently trying to figure out how do we balance that, and how do we, get some of those things incorporated into our standard program to some extent so that it's already included. I would, not to be like cagey. I mean, we definitely want to make sure we're open with the owner, but there's ways that, we can make sure that both things are kind of being achieved.
A very simple programmatic thing, at least for a lot of the work we do, that I think was brought up mid-year in the session, I think in ZGF's office when talking about mass timber, was for residential buildings, the location of the amenity space and not putting that amenity space on the upper level. That carries with it such a structural impact and fire rating impact that that's become, I think, a really critical conversation, at least for us this year, about where you locate that.
Stair size alone, that goes into more of almost like building area, to your point, Robert. It's like, it falls down the whole building. So it's really good. Yeah, don't necessarily mean to get in the weeds or in the philosophy of it all, but it kind of comes down a little bit to it. So yeah, kind of have some backup reasoning for each scenario. The rest of these slides we came up with before we worked. This is back in May. We had kind of a working meeting, so I'm not sure if this is like very useful at this point. But again, just reiterating, we have different presentation styles or lack thereof for different clients. So if it's a large corporation, if it's a state or federal funded project, if we're trying to meet standards, clearly we're going to show we're experts in that. But oftentimes, if it's a developer-led project, we don't talk about it much unless we know they're very interested in looking at it. Sometimes it gives us pushback. So let's see. I think the other elements were, these slides I think we discussed were not super useful at this point, but this is our firm slides we use to educate our own firm. So kind of differentiating between operational and embodied carbon for different projects, how it's changing over time, how different efficiencies of building systems are causing that, the relative proportion of weight of embodied versus operational carbon to change over its lifetime. So I think we mentioned it earlier. I think as a firm in the last year, we've also decided to not try to push mass timber as much as we used to think we could. And that's based on relative lack of success and amount of effort it takes to push our engineers and design team to go that way. So I think we've kind of like come to the conclusion that if the client wants to, we'll present them the options, but we won't belabor the issue. We'll try to create and be creative about hybrid solutions frequently instead of a one size only mass timber. So I think that's kind of how we've worked that in. Let's see. And then here's kind of our back end anecdotal evidence. We're starting to get some post-occupancy analyses of, again, test score improvement, things like this for different measures. And specifically, this conversation was related to mass timbers, so that's why this slide is here. Again, tangential to talking about embodied carbon, but this is kind of like one subset of a mass timber reducing embodied carbon, also improving other things. So you kind of have the social cost of carbon and other elements intertwined. That's kind of it for the slides. Kind kind of want to open it up to anyone else, things we didn't talk about. So again, this is starting with owner conversations, how the client strategies or how things have worked. How much do you do? How much do you not do? Again, how much, this is probably more to the effect of like, what can we do as designers behind the scenes that's not, again, we're not trying to be cagey about anything, but we want to do as much good as we can without creating an enormous issue for the clients. It's just another thing for them to have to juggle for, typically for the PM or whoever's involved on the owner side.
Hey, Sam, another good thing to mention as we kick this off might be the fact that Mackenzie's not here today, but she has issued the projects that are going to be interviewing for their pilot embodied carbon program this week and next. So nice to see that Denver is really actively looking for ways to demonstrate and document benefits of some of these strategies. So good for them for making that happen. And those kind of things I think will help all of us move this forward.
Yeah, I think that's hopefully going to be a good strategy, or we can take parts and pieces from it for every project. I'm so glad they're doing it. Fortunately, none of our projects fit the timing or metric.
Yeah, we had one that I thought would be an ideal fit, but it stalled to the point where we couldn't submit it if we didn't know it was going.
Yeah.
And by the time we had more clarity about that, the deadline had passed. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to learning from which ones did go in.
Yeah, Paul, do we know at all how many projects they are interviewing or teams?
I don't. I think they have at least 8 interview slots. I don't know if they filled them all, but that's kind of what I was looking at, 8 to 9.
Okay.
And they have said they're going to select 3 projects.
Okay. That's exciting.
I had a question about this topic for the group. So I find it really interesting with our corporate workplace clients, for example. They have very public sustainability statements and CSR reports, and they own real estate. For those that own real estate and they occupy real estate and they make design choices with us. And so, how do you bridge the gap between what you see happening on the projects when you're working with this type of client that's kind of out there in front, with them, with their this whole other team that actually is doing the real estate side, kind of ignoring, or or maybe just using different language? Should we be translating it into the language of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions? I find an interesting disconnect that happens, particularly on that workplace workplace clients. Yeah. And I know and I'm specifically those that own the real estate, that we're helping them, not necessarily the lease spaces, which has a whole separate set of challenges. But if anyone worked with any of those technology clients that perhaps don't translate their corporate sustainability into their real estate, and how do we help?
I think even just talking about it, that's been my biggest link of hey, this is what your corporate responsibility is. This project can help. We can, prepare some documents that would help. We've done for a couple of developers that we've worked with, we've done the embodied carbon report and just shown 1% savings. And now they ask for it on every project. They're this is now part of our process in general. We want to know what our savings is. That target's going to keep on moving. But it all started with the conversation of hey, you're tracking different emissions. Why not track embodied carbon? And then we also used it as a bridge between the people who are dealing with the different properties, because they know what they already own. And we were able to have some more conversations about circularity of okay, well, you already own this. You have XYZ resource in this building. You have XYZ resource in this building. Can we combine those into one space? And it kind of empowered them to have the knowledge management that we were missing in terms of just doing that first initial conversation about circularity of okay, what do you even have? And then those people could come to the table and help benefit the conversation of how does this influence another project?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great. I think yeah, getting it into that planning discussion, like when you're so early, you're actually just when you're just like working with the real estate team and planning space movement across a campus or across regions, some cases, and then translating some of that into the metrics that are being used in a whole separate team. It's just fascinating being in the yeah when you're working across these massive organizations. Yeah.
I don't know
Think
if the politics of the last year have changed the the approach in all of this, but at Living Futures, I think 2 years ago, the woman from JLL was there. They were looking at, and that is a massive, massive real estate portfolio, and they were beginning to rank those assets by embodied carbon and operational carbon as a qualifier for like which assets did they value, and it wasn't like a survival of the fittest, but a little bit that they said, hey, we don't want an asset. It may become a less important asset in our portfolio if it's really poorly performing. And I found a lot of hope in that because, that's somebody looking at it. Yes, there's an environmental perspective that they're doing, but really they're looking at it from a financial perspective. And that is the one that so many of our developer clients need to hear. So I don't know how that's evolved. It'd be interesting to see if that's one of these things that's gotten scrubbed from their website in the last year or as an asset identifier. Um, it was encouraging at the time.
I have a general question for the group here, and that is, have you seen any response or change in behavior due to Buy Clean Colorado?
Yes. Is Bailey on?
Yes, yes.
Yes, but I do have some questions about the program. The answer is yes. It's just I'm on a project right now, and the team has said that they no longer have to do Buy Clean Colorado based on the timing. So I need to understand timing, like the element of timing, how that is um, translated into the language of Buy Clean Colorado. For some reason, there's this perception that it's based on when the RFP was released originally, which I find very unusual. I can't imagine that would be how it was written. Yeah, because RFPs get released and then projects go on hold. So it seems strange that you would bank whether or not your project has to follow Buy Clean Colorado. I mean, it meets all the other thresholds. It's a state project. It's But anyway, at least the conversation came up in we're going to follow Buy Clean Colorado regardless. It's just project will likely not be submitting the information to the state.
Yeah, I'd love to just add on to that, I guess, in stating that the Buy Clean Colorado Act impacts projects that begin a solicitation on or after January 1st of 2024. So if it were solicited prior to that date, it would not be subject to the requirements, but anything after that would be.
Yeah. And why the solicitation date instead of like when there's so many other, because any like ideas why they chose the solicitation date as like the
that's how it was written in the statute, and I believe the goal was to kind of give it a clean starting date as to when projects would need to start complying, and then it next then resulted from that solicitation time frame. So it could also apply to projects that kind of skip that design phase and just solicit construction services. So
yeah,
not necessarily tied to any single document, just the process of solicitation.
Yeah.
Could it be that the state also didn't want that the state wanted to avoid any risks of Buy Clean impacting cost? So if a project had been solicited, with a budget in mind or tied to that solicitation. And then, all of a sudden contractors are saying, well, these new requirements are going to increase costs, and then it messes with the funding.
That is a great question. It does have a little bit to do more so with when new projects are funded each year. So when the governor releases the long bill with state funded projects, that happens around April, May, whenever they do end up signing that long bill. So implementing the program starting at January, and being triggered by that solicitation, in theory, would apply to all of those projects funded through the 2024 long bill.
I think I'm gonna follow up with you, Bailey.
Sounds good. Yes, let's chat.
I think the intent is there. I'm like, why are we looking for every reason to not do something?
Not the
But
first.
right, yeah, I know. Especially because again, like we're gonna hit the threshold. I think it's just it goes back to like who's paying for us to document, and
The reporting, yes, no one likes that part of it.
no one likes it. But I'm like, I have to do it for lead. You should have to do it for buy clean. But I'll follow up with you about it. Just to make sure we have our dates right, which I think we do, but it's still gonna be a good case study.
The only other thought I had was not on the Viking Colorado topic, but just a topic that came up, I think, in Laura's recollection of her Greenville experience was the concept of common ask. And obviously, it should be easier to talk about, but embodied carbon reductions, the more architects talk about them, it's kind of a cycle. So the more you bring it up, the more other architects bring it up, the easier it's going to be to bring it up, if that makes any sense. So I don't know how you actually measure that or realize that, but I do think it's a movement that helps everybody.
Well, we're seeing the most influences, especially on like architectural and interior products, actually asking manufacturers for their EPDs. And then once they give it to us, understanding their EPDs with them. I think, it's a hard thing for a manufacturer to produce an EPD. It's expensive. And a lot of the industry is just using them as lead checkpoints and not really understanding the value of that documentation. So I think, part of the common ask is also like having all of this documentation that we're requesting from manufacturers, but actually using it and having that conversation with our manufacturers. So we've had a lot of success with, we have our own internal standards for certain materials. And if we talk to the manufacturer and we're like, hey, we reviewed your EPD and you don't meet our standards, that helps them be like, okay, we know what we're shooting for now. Like there's a common, like, these are the targets that we're going for, whether it be like CLF baselines or if it's just common baselines between firms. I think that's kind of the common courtesy. Like I feel so bad for a lot of these manufacturers who are struggling, or like they have a cool, innovative product and they have to spend, a lot of money to get the EPDs together, and then no one actually really uses them. I think really having those conversations, even when you're like, hey, rep, I'm looking at these 3 products. Let's look at it from an embodied carbon standpoint. Show me the EPDs. What's your recommendation? These are something that we're looking at, has really helped elevate the value of them beyond just a documentation that's really expensive that's become a checklist item.
Another thing too is that I'm not sure why we don't pay attention to products that have LCAs on them. Obviously, there's a lot more rigor to an EPD, but an LCA is at the heart of all EPDs. And asking a client or a supplier for LCA is a good alternate in my mind, as long as it's a legitimate LCA. And I think, this group especially has the strength and knowledge base to look at that LCA and ferret it out, so to speak. But anyway, that's a lower price entry. Won't qualify for Clean Colorado, but anyway, it's an all.
Kind of wanted to come back to we were talking about developers a little bit, and I think maybe we all sort of feel that developers is sometimes the hardest clients to talk to sustainability about. And it's because their business model, it's buy then sell, and a lot of them are looking to sell within like 3 to 5 years. One thing I wanted to mention, and where we've had more success working with developer clients, is if you have a developer that has already selected a site or is targeting development in opportunity zones. So one of the best things about opportunity zones, and I'll just post a link in the chat, is the longer they hold that investment, if they hold up to 10 years, or at least 10 years, they can be exempt from capital gains tax. And that is where, for like our project, PAE and I think Red Brick, are two projects where they're in opportunity zones. And so being able to talk about a project that the developer is going to hold for 10 years, it really opens some doors for more sustainable materials, for energy performance, because if you're going to try and present the cost, operational cost of holding that building for 10 years, then energy efficiency has more runway. And so, I wanted to share that. I was just looking at another link, or I'll just share my screen. Opportunity zones in Colorado. If you can see this. So this map is going to change with the one big something bill. But they're not going away entirely. So the opportunity zones, there's going to be fewer of them, but they, I think, are being essentially becoming more permanent. And then there's this other article where they're starting to look at how is this map going to change. So I'll post that in the chat as well. But I think if you know that your project or your client is working with opportunity zones, then you can start talking about sustainability over a 10-year lifespan as opposed to, first 5 years or something. Sharing.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. And if anyone didn't know, that 179D tax deduction, it's going away, but any project that can start construction before June 30th of 2026 can still be eligible for the 179D energy efficiency tax deduction.
Well, we should probably wrap it up. Wanted to thank Sam and Paul. It was a great conversation that you got started here. We heard a lot of good ideas, good challenges from a lot of people, and that was exactly what we were shooting for. And we will be getting back together in February with our first large group meeting, and are eager to see everyone and share our plans for the coming year and wish everybody a good holiday. And we will talk to you next year. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, so.
Thank you.